Welcome back, everyone, to Zoom Back Camera, the online film forum of the Browning Cinema at the University of Notre Dame. At the top of every show, we do have something we like to say, and I like to read it in order to get it correctly, so I'll do that right now. During these uncertain times that have moved us out of the physical Browning Cinema and into a virtual one, our thoughts are with those battling the virus, battling isolation, battling precarity, and battling the fear inherent to this moment. And alongside that, we want to extend our thanks and appreciations to first responders, medical professionals, grocers, public transit workers, childcare workers, and anyone else on the front lines. Zoom Back Camera is a very small thing to offer, but we do hope these conversations about movies we love will buoy your day and continue the education, fellowship, and dialogue with which we bracket our films in the Browning Cinema. And as we like to do in the Browning Cinema, please feel free to say hello in the chat. And along the way, leave any questions or comments you might have, and we will do our best to loop them into our conversation. And with all of that said, let's welcome to Zoom Back Camera, Professor Sarah Edmands Martin. Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do.
Well, thanks, Ricky. I am an assistant professor at Indiana University, the Eskenazi School of Art, Architecture, and Design. And my specialty is graphic design, but I dabble here and there in other things. I focus a lot on dark fairy tale and narrative, the kind of the visualization of story, looking particularly at folktale, fairy tale, yeah, and kind of that overlap of like children's stories to myth and how we're still telling those stories even as adults, long after we are big children.
Mhm. Out of curiosity then, well, first of all, thank you for choosing Event Horizon, which will be a fun film to play with. But I'm curious, do you have a first memory of seeing Event Horizon? Were you young when you saw it?
Yes, I was young because I was 8, or no, I was maybe 10, around 10, because I just come off seeing Jason Isaacs in The Patriot, and I wanted more Jason Isaacs in my life. And so I walked myself down to the local library and I rented Event Horizon blind, not knowing what it was, but just knowing Jason Isaacs was in it. And so I went on a journey that day, and it's got this like brutal but also strangely nostalgic feel for me, because I saw it really kind of at like a formatively young age.
I thought you were going to say, I saw Jason X instead of Jason Isaacs. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. You saw a deep space slasher and we're like, oh, let's see Event Horizon. But, no, not quite.
Not quite. I was going in with like heart eyes, and those heart eyes like got bigger and bigger and bigger and then exploded into bloody gore.
Well, let's start off by locating where exactly the Event Horizon is for you.
Mm.
Do you prefer Event Horizon or the Pit and the Pendulum?
Although I do love the Pit and the Pendulum, I'm gonna still say Event Horizon for the sake of like nostalgia, as I mentioned.
Okay. Event Horizon or Alien?
I gotta say Alien.
Event Horizon or The Thing?
Okay, both have really amazing body horror. But The Thing was kind of like the first of its kind, so I gotta go with that one. Yeah.
Event Horizon or Hellraiser?
So I feel like Event Horizon is Hellraiser in space, which is better. So Event Horizon.
Okay. Event Horizon or In the Name of the Rose?
Um, mm, mm, mm. Again, it's in space. Event Horizon.
Okay. I don't know if you've seen this one, Event Horizon or the Ren and Stimpy episode Marooned.
Okay, I was not allowed to watch. I didn't have TV for a really long time growing up, and I didn't have like Nickelodeon or MTV or anything, and so I have no idea what that is.
Fair. Or the Necronomicon.
Necronomicon, yeah, it's wonderful.
The Horizon or Moon?
Okay, I really like Moon because it doesn't have the body horror or kind of, but it kind of doubles down on psychological terror. It's super claustrophobic. It's a total trip. Moon, highly recommend.
Event Horizon or Gravity?
I did like Gravity, but Event Horizon.
And lastly, Event Horizon or Interstellar?
I did like Interstellar, but Event Horizon.
Okay, good. Now we got
Prodigy. Is there a Prodigy soundtrack in any of those movies?
Let's see. Yeah, The Pit and the Pendulum ends with some really some prodigious prodigy.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, now we got the constellation, as it were, somewhat set.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pop into this movie. We learned some things about what's going down in the future. 5 years ago, the first permanent colony was established on the moon.
Good job, us.
Hey, good. Would you move to a moon colony?
Yes, and I would be very anxious the whole time given how much sci-fi I've seen. Yeah. But I'd do it.
In 2032, we have mining on Mars, which is a really interesting thing that they throw in there. But
never comes up again.
Nope, but there's like a little bit of industry inserted in.
True.
2040, the Event Horizon launches, disappears. 2047 now, Event Horizon, she's back. I know this is not to be a big question, but I'm curious, how do you feel about the gendered language on ships? I
haven't really thought about it, but my first instinct is to be like, why though? Like, why now still? Like, I got it when everything was a patriarchal object, but it's no longer. So also this ship, spoiler, is alive. They can choose their own pronoun.
Right. So we meet the scientists behind Event Horizon, the ship, and in a very common science fiction trope, he is the scientist who might be too smart for his own good and the good of the intergalactic world.
Yes.
Do you like this? Well, first of all, do you like the trope and they like the madman general leading us into war?
Yeah, I do. It's definitely a trope in science fiction and other kinds of genres too. And I do really like it here because he starts out likable. I think we are pro-Weir at the beginning of the movie. And so I think that there's a way in which it kind of prompts us to reflect on our bias here, and that we go into this, and actually looping back to something you said about that industry insertion, like we are meant to believe in a very aliens type way that, you know, commerce and industry has kind of signed off on unending exploration, not caring what lives are lost, right? It's kind of an industrial colonization, and we're behind it because we might capitalize on it. That there's because we are pro-Weir at the beginning, we kind of like check ourselves halfway through where we're recognizing like how bad this can go. So I think it works here, and I think it gets, you know, pretty wacky towards the end, which I also we got to start with something like normal, and then we just go right off into the deep end.
Mm-hmm. He's lamenting his wife Claire, who we don't know. We really don't get the backstory. We don't know much there. Although I had a note here, he's crazy for using a straight razor in space. But it's interesting now that he mourns Claire, and spoiler alert, while he's shaving. Get it. As a designer, how do you feel about their shirts?
I mean, it's got a lot of appeal to me. Very highly functional, identifiable shirt. You know, just in case you get exploded in space, like they know whose shirt was for whose body. It's a nice, clean, condensed sans serif typeface. I mean, I think that's exactly what it's meant to serve, as like uber utilitarian functionality. Like the shirts are not for comfort, they're for, you know, identifying who you are and your rank, and, you know, it's a super slick future sans serif typeface. So I think it's just vibing in the right way.
Justified left.
I know.
I love those shirts. I was thinking, oh, that might be a deep cut Halloween costume, but it could be a good one.
That is a good one. I think I saw one floating around on the internet once, and I was like,
Smart. And we learned then that we are on board the Lewis and Clark. First off, you own a spaceship. What do you name your deep space craft?
Ooh. I mean, my first instinct is something dumb like Falcor.
That works. That
works.
Falcor. Yeah, especially if this is your mining industry and it's FALCORP.
Yeah, Falcor. And it's like bright white shiny, but very metallic, like highly metal, heavy, clunky, but like white.
Love it. And now to their choice of name, which is very purposeful, I think, is the Lewis and Clark. Right. You reading anything into that?
Interstellar colonization much? Yeah, I think that there's a mirror being held up to like our history as humans on this planet, our approach to scientific discovery, our approach and kind of our philosophy on what is curiosity. You know, before the 17th century, curiosity was like a moral vice. Like to be curious was to be like very deviant and potentially destructive to society. And then after Francis Bacon in like the 17th century, we have this kind of shift where he's the father of the empirical method, how we base what we know on what we see, which I think is a huge trope that will come up later in this movie. And going and exploring and discovering becomes like the height of what is meant to be not only like masculine, but to know truth, and to what to be, or what is man, right, is to go and explore and conquer and dominate. And I think that the movie, not to jump too far ahead, really kind of questions whether that's, I think it questions, as a lot of like 20th century science fiction does, like the ethics of that, and to what harm that might do to like laborers, as the crew, we'll probably talk about the crew, are definitely sacrificed, and ultimately humanity.
Mm-hmm. Well, on the crew, because we meet them just smoking in space. I love it when people smoke in space.
Me too.
Cigarettes are pretty in film. They're bad for you, but they look amazing in space. And we meet them. And thoughts on this crew generally, how they're presented in terms of labor, because that's something that is kind of front loaded and then less discussed potentially, but it's there.
Yeah, I think it's again kind of subtle, like the Aliens-esque, corporation sending the ship off. But you do get hints through the dialogue and the script that they were on vacation. They were kind of called back from their, 2 weeks or whatever. They don't care about this mission. And not in like a bad way, but they're just there to do the job. They're search and rescue.
They're grunts.
Contractors. And, they've got the very quintessential common workmen's names. And then in
Cooper, Miller, Smitty, Smith. Yeah.
Smitty.
I love a Smitty.
On any ship, any ship has to have a Smitty. And then in like high contrast to that, we have Dr. Weir, who he's, his whole affect is very different. He's very set apart on the ship. He explains things and has to be asked to like translate his like highfalutin science. Like he's not connecting with those people. And so we get this kind of sense of like the layman on a mission, trying to do their job, but ultimately wanting to get back home to their families, ultimately caring about other things. And then you have the kind of like obsessive, myopic, another kind of sight illusion there, a very obsessed, myopic scientist whose one goal puts everybody else at peril.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of singularity in his life.
Yeah.
And we're then landing, or we're orbiting, I guess, around Neptune. Just quick question, what's your favorite planet? I'm curious.
Venus is pretty, but all planets are really cool. Space is awesome.
That's the presidential debate kind of answer. Like, they're all great.
That was wonderful.
And then we finally see the event horizon. And to a point earlier, when Weir is explaining what time travel is, he takes a pinup picture, impressed that those are still a thing in 2040, that they haven't gone to anything beyond like a glossy Playgirl or Playboy, hasn't wear, I guess.
No holograms of Playboy.
Yep. He folds it and he pierces it.
Yes, he penetrates the pinup paper with his pen.
With a like a cigar pen, like a bulbous weirdo pen.
Mm-hmm.
And then we finally see the event horizon. And some might say it's phallic. I read other places online that it looks like a dong. Um, any thoughts on that Freudian read?
I think the Freudian read is there. And I think that, I think that there's a Freudian read. What's actually more interesting to me is that it's just puncturing a body. That it is a female body. And there's, the classic kind of horror / sci-fi objectification of women in like underwear, and, there's Stark being asked if she wants something hot and black inside of her. But it's kind of, he's describing the scientific theory that he's created, and it punctures a body. It like hurts and breaks a body, and he's describing it in this way of like love and adoration, and like, look at this beautiful thing that I did. But I think that there's foreshadowing in this, that like, what's sacrificed again at the end of the day for you to get from your point A to point B? Well, you're crunching a body in half.
Yeah, and then says, and then things return to normal.
Right. Everything's fine, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I also think that, with the ship, I do see phallus, but more so I see the cross, which there's a lot of kind of religious imagery, particularly like Catholic religious imagery. There's obviously a lot of talk about hell later on in the movie, but I do know that Anderson, I think, based the architecture of the ship off of the Cathedral of Notre Dame, like the footprint. And so it is really meant to, and we get lots of shots of like cross like windows and lots of bodies floating through the air in like a crucifixion type pose. So there is that religious iconography embedded in multiple places. And one of them is certainly the ship.
Mm-hmm. Well, getting to the ship then, we head on board. It is called, either reading that you want, whatever we're thinking the design might pull from, it is called a corpsicle.
So good. It's one of my favorite moments in the movie, because I think who says it? It's one of the women.
I think Peters.
Yeah, I think it's Peters, who's kind of like the matriarch-ish, if there is one on the crew, right? She's like Mama Bear. Who plays a pretty like, normal and straight-faced for most of the movie, but she's got this great kind of like pulpy line that I love.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, it's called a tomb in which there's corpuscles.
Right.
And we'll get to kind of the vibe maybe, but I'm curious at the general design of the inside, and this unfolds throughout the movie, but because it really is important once they board and we're looking at it, how do you feel about the set design? What speaks to you? What works?
Yes. So I think the set design is probably the thing that has stuck with me the longest of this there are a couple other things that we'll probably talk about later, a couple flashes of clips. But the set design is super ornate, but really menacing. It like looks like multiple specific medieval torture devices. So the gravity drive, the room that it's in itself, straight up looks like you've entered an Iron Maiden, right? Those like chambers full of spikes, but you're inside of it. So we as a viewer enter the like most important part of the ship, the heart of the ship, as Weir calls it. And it's this Iron Maiden. The gravity drive looks like a Spanish collar with the spikes on it. There are references to the Catherine wheel as well, and this really awful device called the Scavenger's Daughter. And you just see them over and over. And then on the other side, you have all of this kind of vaulted archways, really intricate, the crosses, the kind of meticulous nature of this detailing that looks like the inside of the Notre Dame Cathedral or a Catholic church, like really overwrought, really overdone. And the history of Catholic churches, that interior space was meant to put you in a state of awe. It was meant to invite you to transcend your mortal body and be like, I'm here, I'm with the divine. And so you kind of get the most debased of the medieval time with the torture devices, and then you get the most lauded, the most
the other end of awe-inspiring, right?
We got both ends of awe the terrible and awe the amazing and wonderful. And I think that it's interesting that it's got kind of like that Gothic vibe on a spaceship. So we're seeing, in the way that Weir kind of collapses that paper and takes us from point A to point B, describing the gravity drive, we're also aesthetically being reminded of this human history of suffering and torture, but also future and exploration and potential. And for me, that's one of the most interesting things about the movie. And just like, it's such a good, the set design is so, like you could pause and just look at what's designed there forever. And as you know, Anderson got a huge budget, like a strikingly large budget for that time for a sci-fi horror movie. He was coming right off of Mortal Kombat success. And I think Paramount just like threw him a ton of money and was like, here you go. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he built the Event Horizon set on the set right next door to where they were doing Titanic. So like that's kind of where that's the level at which he was able to make this vision come to life. Mm-hmm. Which is cool.
Yeah, it is amazing. I was surprised just in reading reviews that less people latched onto that because it is so
not do well.
Well, it didn't do well. But when you do something like a space film or a horror film, any of these genres, and you see something you've never seen, or whatever, we've seen obviously medieval torture devices like the pin and the pen, like things are rearticulated, but to see something so pretty, fresh for the moment, and not to have anyone excited by it is surprising for me. But
I agree. 10-year-old me was like, this is my jam. This is finally someone came up with body horror in space.
Yeah, just waiting for it.
I was waiting my whole life. But I do know that kind of like the production history of this movie was really fraught. So they got a huge budget, but then something happened. I think Titanic got pushed, and so Paramount really wanted Anderson to release Event Horizon when it wasn't ready to be released. And so I think the story goes he had like 4 weeks to finish editing the movie while he was wrapping all of the gore sequences. So he was still filming gore, wrapping the editing of the movie. So like when they did the test screen, the audience got this like half-baked version of Event Horizon, didn't have a real score. The visual effects, which did not age well. The practical effects I love. The
CGI is tough CGI in the late 90s generally. So,
but none of that was done. So it had a lot more of the gore scenes in it, and so it bombed the test screen. And so Paramount got really kind of nervous and asked him to cut like a third of the movie. Most of that came out of those gore sequences, and so what you've got is like some of the characters. Like I think Stark is supposed to have more of a backstory, but she really doesn't. Like we don't get any of her kind of like psychosis. And I think that's one of the things that was cut.
Speaking, you mentioned jam, and speaking of jam and CGI, we got some black goo, and that is, I guess that is the Event Horizon technically, right? That's the border of the black hole.
Yeah. So the event. I see. Yeah. The Event Horizon. I always read it as like a metaphor. Like.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like, it's sciencey stuff. I'm an artist. Like, give me a good enough explanation. I'm like, perfect, wonderful. I believe you. So.
How do you like it narratively or aesthetically? Do you like the heart of the drive, the gravity drive?
I do like it. I like me a floating goo that can suck you in and spit you out. And what's great is that we're always kind of like on the edge, about to tip into quote unquote the hell. We're always threatened in this like Lovecraftian way by the black, dark, infinite horror that is space, that is the unknown. It went somewhere for 7 years, this ship. We don't really know where. We're articulating it as hell because we've got all this quote unquote evidence. But who's to say what that is? I would argue when Mr. Justin, the boy child of the ship,
Baby Bear.
Yeah, Baby Bear. When Baby Bear gets sucked into the gravity drive and comes out like comatose, like infantile comatose, he has that really cheesy line where he's like, "I saw the darkness within me." What I interpret that as is cosmic horror. Like he's kind of peeled back. He's seen something beyond what we're really meant to see, and it's like completely debilitated him, and he goes into this state where he tries to kill himself in the what's that, the
air chamber.
Mm-hmm.
That thing.
But aesthetically the goo's great. Yeah, I love me a good black goo.
I like I do like the psychoanalytic read of a lot of what's going on.
Yeah, it's
so the macabre Lacanian moment, or the inability to see oneself, and the ability to identify at the limits of that, and then being forced into this identification, which is like moving through stages against your own will. So it's mere development done in an inorganic way. And because he's so young, that like just cuts him off from not only what might be next in life, but living itself.
Yeah, Baby Bear's not ready to be not a baby bear.
No, he just wants to be with Mama Bear. And well, and it's funny too, because he's I think of him, if anyone saw the show Dead at 21. So I just see him as so ill-fated, that actor Jack Noseworthy. He's never gonna see 22 in various ways.
I mean, I think that read is actually really great too, because it comes back again to that idea that there's a violation of nature that keeps happening here, that the event horizon, we shouldn't reach that horizon. And yet Weir keeps pushing us there. The science behind Weir's ship keeps pushing us there. And there's this, as you described, kind of an unnatural development that Mr. Justin goes through. And there's a way that the ship reminds me of like Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner, where you violate nature, you kill the albatross, as it were, and for the rest of the story, you're kind of suffering through these psychological ramifications of that kind of inversion of the natural order. So
we have Peter, the hallucinations are starting, and Peters is meeting her child with the scabby legs, and Justin is writhing, the core is failing, and into the like the HVAC of the gravity drive.
Yes.
It looks like Cube to me, which came up in last night's show. And Cube,
which is also a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
Just gonna and say from last night's conversation, Cube is the better movie.
Okay. So he's in Cube, and regardless of how it comes to be, Claire shows up, and Claire's got some peepers on her.
Right.
And eyes are going to be pretty crucial in this movie. Thoughts on that look, the motif, just generally what you're thinking?
Yes. It's super striking, right? Because again, we've been in this like very dark, gothic, torture device-esque interior. And then we go into another interior and we kind of see underneath of all of this kind of like medieval imagery is actually pure science. Like that's how I read the HVAC system. It's like we're in the matrix. It's all the computer chips you could ever imagine built into this tunnel, and Weir's like in it, and he knows what he's doing because he's a scientist. But then I love that moment where we get the racking of the focus, which to me always means ghosts or like spooky. And so even in high science tunnel where we are, we know that this is something supernatural or psychological. And even all the time, all the science and technology and all the computer chips in the world are not going to save us, because it's not of this world. And what Weir has built will ultimately not be enough to save him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so continuing that, and kind of your rhyme of the ancient mariner thing, we're also learning, just like we're not going to have any water, we have the claustrophobia, or whatever you want to call it, of oxygen, because there's CO2, there's more CO2, right? Or whatever. Regardless, like some things are happening.
We can't breathe in space, but we're in space, and something failed, and now we're going to die.
Right, but they're not too concerned about it. I mean, they huff and puff all they want. They're not too miserly with their air. But let's get to a moment where they are very miserly with their air, and that is when Justin is in the anti-lock chamber. That's what it's called.
The decompression chamber?
Sure. Yeah. Well, this is funny because okay, so he's told to blow out
right
air from his lungs. He goes into space, and Miller pushes him back in and saves him. The fact that we couldn't explain what the chamber is called is somewhat telling to this question. You cool with space rules being broken?
I'm pretty fine with it. But I will say that, I mean, I did have a moment when I was rewatching it recently, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that can't happen. Because like something that happens in horror movies, which makes them very satisfying, right? There's all this theory around horror that it's kind of like a collective nightmare, and when we experience it, we have this catharsis and all this. But there's a moment where anxious problem solvers like myself watch horror movies, and I'm like, okay, so that's what I have to do to not die. I felt myself thinking like, okay, so if I was in space about to be ejected accidentally somehow from an airlock decompression chamber, could I
you just got it.
I just gotta, and then close my eyes real tight. But what I do like about, what I think is kind of like dark in that is that what those steps kind of feel like to me is like evacuating a lot of what makes us human, right? So it's like your eyes get blown out, close your eyes, take your eyes out. They say something like curl up in a fetal position, blow all the lungs out of your air. So you're basically a corpse, and just be corpse-like and hope that we can get to you in time. So it's really scary in that regard. And also, like, I think what happens is the audience is like thinking to themselves, like, okay, could I get all the air out of my lungs right now if I tried? So it's a great kind of like, I don't know, interactive moment with the audience.
Mm-hmm. And it's also one of the, it's not, I mean, you're learning something, right? It's not like how to 50 ways to survive like 50 deadly scenarios.
Right.
It's not good advice. But you also don't need the advice because A, you're not going in space, and B, if you're there, you're dead. So I do like the idea of like, I can survive that. I know what to do now.
Yeah, check.
We did have a question. Would you say that Event Horizon could be formulated out to Aliens plus Hellraiser equal this movie?
Yeah, I think that that's a great formula. I mean, we've got, so Adrian Biddle, the cinematographer, was also the cinematographer for Alien. So you see some of that aesthetic you see some of that thread of how he treats light, how he treats darkness. Like the scene where Weir disappear, I am home.
Ooh.
I was like, even today, I'm like, that is a great
I am home.
and dark. I know, just like it's a great shot. The shot with the cross window and the body float, it always like stuns me. I'm always like, yes, that's such a good shot. The shots with like different like lights going around and through mists, in the kind of vaulted like cathedral like rooms, especially the like sick bay or whatever. I don't know, I'm Star Trekking it. Yeah, so there is some kind of aesthetic tie there between the two because it's Biddle on both. And then Hellraiser, there is actually a lot. There are ties. One of the, I think it's the practical effects artists also worked on Hellraiser. So when we see Weir version 2.0, he looks very similar to what we have seen in Hellraiser, and I think that it's because you've got creatives on this team that worked on both. But I also do think that it's space body horror with philosophical questions about what it means to be curious and the ethics of scientific discovery. And I will say that, like Hellraiser, I don't think that the hell that is presented is necessarily bad or good. I think it's just an extreme. So I think it's an extreme that we're not meant to get to. And it's an extreme in a hell that is manifested through human behavior. But I don't think that it's necessarily pure evil. I think it's just an extreme.
Well, getting to going kind of with Hellraiser, maybe potentially more than Alien at this point. But we're at the point where hallucinations are coming in and torture is really picking up. At this point, it's the more mental, psychological, or emotional torture. It will be supplemented soon with physical torture. What do you, with all of the various citations or whatnot, and we talked about it a little bit, but anything else on the torture front that interested you?
I think that
either with Hellraiser or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think that there's some aesthetic stuff that I'm drawn to because it references this like art historical background that I have with Bruegel and Bosch, and there's even like Wittgen's photography that I think I think you can see in some of the set design pieces. And I have this like personal nostalgia, not only for this movie, but for this experience of like, I'm not Catholic and I didn't grow up religious. And I found art history textbooks from my father when he said in Italy, and like looking at Bosch paintings, just being like, what an imaginative like painter. Like, look at all these bodies writhing around, doing terrible things to each other. Like, what imagination is man? Like, wow. And I think that what I like about what I find effective about the torture scenes in this movie is that it reveals the worst and most based form of humanity that we've seen recorded in lots of other ways. And it's kind of witnessed through hallucinations. It's witnessed through an actual video recording. It's witnessed at first through the like audio, the scrambled audio recording that we finally kind of like decode as revealing, what happened to the previous crew. So, I don't think there's much else to really kind of pin down to that, except that for me, it's a revelation of the worst that people can do to each other.
And I think this is the archives, the Save Yourself from Hell, when they realized that the Latin translation and whatnot, I do take it as word. I was thinking also in the film, like, these are all artifacts of the ship, and I don't necessarily think that's something that would be trusted given everything else. And so this could be feeding their fear of what happened. when it could be something much more mundane.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about the ship, right? So we come to learn that the ship is alive, right? Stark has her theory that she proposes to Miller, like about halfway or 3/4 of the way through. She's like, hey, I think this is, like, the bio readings on this thing suggest
Through the roof.
through the roof. Where's the crew? Everywhere. Um, but it again reminds me of this kind of critique of curiosity and the limits of science and the scientist, in that the ship has been gone for 7 years and it's changed. It's no longer the same ship, right? And they have this. Stark articulates this theory about how they're like entering an immune system that's like it's messing with them because they're inside something that's alive. And I couldn't help but imagine, like, so why, like, this, it's just reacting naturally almost to like what it perceives as being something that it either doesn't need, or it wants to eat, or it wants to, have its way with in whatever, form. But it's this kind of like, again, man traversing to where they shouldn't be, messing with something that they shouldn't mess with, and it's just kind of doing its own thing. And it's not necessarily good or bad. It just is not where we're supposed to be. And so the kind of the ship manifesting psychosis, horrible behavior, murder, etc., and then also whatever artifacts might push the current crew to the edge. Like, why no one questioned that, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. And what the ship is doing is also, I mean, it's tantalizing them. Like, it is, and with the Julia Kristeva notion about like the abject always edging upon seduction, and that they are pulled into their however the ship is presenting to them. If it's the lost shipmate, if it's the child, these things that they know are horrible things, but they can't get away from them. They go further into the torture rather than move away from it.
And in that way, there is that, plus Hellraiser kind of motif too, in that it's not really pleasure, it's not really pain, but it's an extreme, and we're drawn to it, but we're experiencing something intensely.
We're at the event horizon.
We're at the event horizon.
We are at the extreme. So things start to go downhill for various members of the ship. There is the great line about the ship won't leave you, and then Weir says that the ship won't leave you. Like this, you're never going to detach from it. And Miller says, well, fine, then you'll be walking home. And then he says, I am home. So good. And the Peters then falls to her death. And this is something, actually, I'm curious about this. Did you get the impression that that it's fueled by, what fuels the gravity drive? Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that's come up in like lots of kind of reviews of Event Horizon and literature around it, because it kind of doesn't follow a lot of rules. Like, it'll turn on and then it'll turn off. It'll turn on, it'll turn off. You're not sure when it's turning on or why. I don't really,
like
I never really
blood?
thought about
Is it blood? Is it like emotion? Like,
I always got the sense that it like woke up when a new crew came in. And so whatever it feeds on might be whatever is inherent in a person. Like, so, why make these people experience psychosis? In my mind, it needs that for something. It never really, because we don't end up going, the crew doesn't end up going all the way back, to where the Event Horizon was before. Only, well, 2 of them do. But we don't see it. And so you don't really know, again, kind of like the trustworthiness of the ship author, the ship narrator, is like we don't understand its motivations, which is I think it makes it scarier because it really is that Lovecraftian horror thing where it's so beyond, it doesn't even follow our modes or norms of normal motivation.
Yeah. It's unevenly written.
Yes.
How purposely that's done, I'm not sure. But I think they have a good handle on just like don't define it, let it be,
Yeah.
which is smart.
Yeah.
Smart. We do have finally Weir's flashback to Claire's suicide. Any thoughts on the guilt complex or the reaction or?
I think it just sets up, it just kind of nail in the coffin, or nail in the like motif of Weir as this kind of like heartless, neglectful man that I mean, she's such a shallow character. In my mind, she's actually not, she's just kind of a manifestation of the ship. And I see her as like a female version of the ship, the way that she talks to him and entices him. I know that she was obviously real and all of the psychoses are the ship, but I see her a lot as the ship. Yeah.
Yeah, that the ship was bungled science that knew to let itself go.
Yes.
And he wouldn't let it go.
Yes. I mean, there's a huge, like, I mean, his obsession with the ship is like borderline, like either romance or sexual or something.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, in terms of like, her suicide and like us seeing it, I don't know that we needed to like fully like see it. I actually really appreciate the subtle intro that we had at the beginning where the water drips from the faucet. He looks over to the tub, he's shaving, and he has this pause where he looks at the blade in the mirror of himself and has that. And I think like having it calcified or clarified later is nice, but I'm not as big on the guilt train for this movie as like motivation, because I'm not fully bought into like the Catholic read of the good and evil. Again, I think it's just an extreme. I think it's more of a cosmic horror. And I think like it doesn't really map to the rest of the characters. Like, I don't think that I think Miller feels regretful that he was in a situation where he had to sacrifice like the Burning Man crew member that comes back to haunt him. But I think he recognizes that he saved the rest of his crew by doing that. And it was in fact a noble thing. And so I don't think he's plagued by guilt. I also am not sure that Peters feels guilty that her son is at home. She just misses him and loves him. So I'm not as like big on the guilt read.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily, it's not the trajectory of the emotions, it's just the volume of the emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if it's the suicide or this moment where there would have been a ton of adrenaline in the decision making, or her child, it's just these are powerful things that it's using to push you toward extremes.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not all guilt. And it's good to not frame it as guilt, I think. I'm with you on that completely.
Yeah.
So Weir then spirals, and he puts the explosive on the Lewis and Clark. The shot of Smitty when he realizes there's only 6 seconds left is
so
such a sweet shot. Like it is.
Because there's a moment right before where you're like, he's gonna get it. He's gonna, because he's like, I worked so hard, like I will. And like, that's going back to like the Lewis and Clark crew. There's a way that they are very, you know, they're the layman, they're kind of blue collar in this space world, right? But they also have this like sensibility and groundedness to them that make them very admirable. Like I admire all of them. There's not a character amongst that crew that I don't have some kind of like stake in and for. And we don't get a ton of Smitty, but when we do, he's just, you know, he's good. And you get this sense that they all want to protect each other. They want to get home, and he goes that extra mile. It's not just Miller, right, who makes sacrifices. Like, they all are trying to help each other, and it was just heartbreaking when
A tough moment.
he bites it.
We then are introduced to Weir version 2.0 and his flaying skills of DJ, your boy Jason X.
Jason.
How'd you like that set piece? That,
I mean, it's wonderful.
that
Again,
quick flaying.
it's like, it's Red Dragon before Red Dragon. It's again, referencing both what we used to do to people for torture, but also vivisection, which is a path to finding knowledge about the human body. And here it's being totally distorted and used in the worst kind of way, but references a practice of human science and industry that we endorse in some contexts and write off or justify in some contexts. And then in others, right, it's wrong, it's, abhorrent behavior, it's cruel. So it's highly dramatic, which I liked. And apparently they still have that like set piece somewhere in Paramount's like set closet. And apparently it looks just like Jason Isaacs. So if it ever goes up for auction, somebody better let me know, because
well, and the development of medical instruments is something that was learned through torture as well.
yes.
And the fact that the ones that they have on that ship are definitely leaning toward the medieval side of, like, that bone saw is, or even just like the hook, like they know what they're mixing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Weir and Miller then have various confrontations, or not really. I mean, one main one, I guess. And the ship is really full mast, back alive.
Yes.
Cooper ends up blowing his air pack and coming back, I guess.
Again, like, just like this earnest kind of like, I can do it, I'll work to make it happen, I hope it does. And it does in this instance. We get a couple scares with him though, like we're not sure if he's gonna make it a few times.
Mm-hmm. And the Weir, so Weir as now monster is ejected through the cross.
Right. Well, before we get there though, I do want to say that, like, again, on the opposite side of like, so we've got Corpsicle. Now, by this time, you got to another one of my favorite lines, which is, where we're going, we won't need eyes to see. Just like easy, but also like really dark, and again touches on this like philosophical like dimension of the extreme. Is it chaos, is it pleasure, is it pain? We don't know, but we won't need our physical eyes anymore. Like, we won't need to be human, or we'll be something beyond human in order to see it and appreciate it.
Right. And if Weir's issue is the inability to identify improper objects, right?
Yes.
And he is pushing all of his identification and projection into science and the ship, then you wouldn't need human eyes.
Right.
Because you have an incorrect development of identification and attachment.
Yeah. And there's also the
cyborg, so there you go.
Exactly. And in a lot of ways, he uses a lot of language of the human body on the ship, on her, right? On the ship, on the event horizon. The heart of the ship is the gravity drive. And by the time we've gotten to, Hellraiser version of Weir, and he's saying, you won't need eyes to see, but the eyes are the, windows to the soul. The eyes are the things that we look at the first on a human face. And so he's basically saying, we don't need humanity. Like, where we're going, like I envision this pure science, and I don't care to be human anymore, which is terrifying.
Mm-hmm. And when you become that, you are willing to kill everyone around you, which he does his level best to do. Miller ends. How do you think of the Miller's ending sequence with
his kind of like, I think Weir is like, do you see? Do you see? And we are getting all these flashes of like Bruegel Boschian torture. And then he gets, Miller gets the detonating device and he says, yeah, I think I see, and sacrifices himself. And I think that for me, I read that as Miller seeing the limit of what a human can do to another human and choosing the kind of the option to be the best version of a human that he can be. And so he's also, I think there's a way that he's sort of righting the wrong that maybe he perceived as like, when he let the Burning Man die, that story that he tells, we don't actually ever see it, but he's sort of he's sacrificing now himself because that's the right thing to do in order to save the rest of his crew. Which, what I love about Miller, and like Lawrence Fishburne does a great job with him, is that you never really doubt that he won't do the right thing. Like there's no like moral conflict in him where he's like, oh, I can't sacrifice. Like, no, he's like, no, I think I see, like, this is the depraved lowest low that a human can go, and I'm going to choose sacrifice and to save the people that I love. And so I think when he says I see, he's seeing both sides.
Mm-hmm. And he's a judicious captain. He admits when he doesn't know something, or he'll be like, that's weird. I mean, he keeps the ship in order. It's tidy. It's with it. So he'd be a good one.
Still with him.
I do like the line. I think that Stark says it. The ship won't let anyone leave. And that gave some Hotel California vibes to me.
Oh yeah.
But also, like, why? Like, why can't, like, what does it have to gain from
Shining too, right? Got some Kubrick vibe there too.
Yeah, that it will envelop you, it will take you, it will eat you.
Yeah.
And that's the other, I mean, as much as, I mean, if we're going to assign body parts to it, the other thing that I would see, if you imagine, I have my pen on me, it happens to work. If there's like the gravity drive and here, and then the like stained glass this, you actually invert it, it would also be like the mouth going into the digestive system. And so there is something faggle about it too, like the eating of it. Yeah. But anyway, you're not getting out unless you are Stark and Cooper and Justin.
Yeah, Justin's in the like suspension tank after going out into space without any clothes on, so he's not doing
status unclear.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I don't think we said it explicitly, but Justin's whatever you call that when you are like bleeding out it's
good,
effective. And that was actually a moment where the CGI was really good.
It was good. And here's the thing, like, for the time, that CGI was actually really, really good. There's some scenes where they're doing things with like light through floating objects that's all CGI that looks really good, really believable. Like, you wouldn't even know now that it's CGI, I just think it's light. But there are some shots that are really great. There's some like floating water bottles that I'm like, meh. But yeah. No, absolutely. The like slow-mo eye twist, blood splatter in space was
chef's kiss. So 72 days later, Stark wakes up, rescue team pulls off that mask, and we find a Weir. You like the fake out ending?
Yeah, and I can't remember, do we have one of those in like Alien or Aliens? I feel like we have one of those in Aliens as well. So I think it's kind of like I feel like it was an easy an easy way to begin the ending. But I think what it actually does is set up the like slow close of the doors right at the end where you're not fully sure. Because they've taken, to use your kind of like metaphor, they've taken the head of the event horizon and like jettisoned off. But it's still the event horizon. The gravity drive is gone. The gravity drive went back to wherever, the seven-year hell that it was in before. But you're still like riding on this piece of something that came alive. And I think that the end kind of sets up the question mark of like, are they actually getting out, or did they just wake up and thus again reawaken the ship?
Oh, right. And that's why maybe they have the kind of clunky thing with Cooper being like so emphatic about like, it's okay.
I know. Yeah, we've got like the knowledge of the audience is like, are you though?
And then we get some tunes at the end.
Yeah. Some industrial like techno, space techno, which is another great thing that I like about this movie is just the soundtrack is both like, you've got some nice like Philharmonic like overtures, and then you've got some Prodigy and space techno.
Mm-hmm. Some witches brew.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now that we've worked our way through Event Horizon, do you want to recast it?
Oh, yes. Okay. Okay.
You ready? Okay. Do you want to go small character to big or big to small?
Let's go small to big.
Okay. Who is your baby bear? Who's that baby bear?
Baby bear. Okay, so I don't know the names off the top of my head, but who's the new like little guy who's playing like Spider-Man?
Tom Holland.
That's Baby Bear.
That's a good one. I got Timothée Chalamet.
Oh, good. Oh, he'd be so good.
Mm-hmm.
That poor angel.
I know.
Oh,
Who's your Smitty?
My Smitty would be okay. Again, I should have written this down. Who's Guy Ritchie likes using him a lot. He's got like the shaved head and like he's like an action hero now.
Jason Statham.
Yeah, I think I'd have him as a Smitty.
Okay, he's a good one.
Just describing who. I should have written these names down.
So I went with Matthew Rhys from The Americans, but it's strictly because he looks so much like him.
Oh, okay. So I know who you're talking about. They look exactly alike. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, we'll bring in the modern day.
Same face. Mm-hmm,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
Okay. Who is DJ the medic? Your Jason X.
Yeah. So I was thinking about other like medical folks. And I was thinking about oh my gosh. I went a little bit older. And this actually might be a good character for well, anyway, I was thinking about the guy who plays House.
Oh, Hugh Laurie?
Yeah. I love British again. Like I was like, who else do I think is like a nice British man?
Mm-hmm. That's a
They're
good
probably
one.
the same generation.
Mm-hmm. I went with Carrie Russell strictly because I want to keep the Americans intact.
I'm also thinking I should have gender bent this cast now that I'm thinking about it. Dang it. Okay.
Okay, who is your Peters, your mama bear?
Okay, so weird choice, but Charlize Theron. Force her into the maternal role.
Nice. I went with Clifton Collins Jr.
Who's that?
He plays one of the murderers in Capote. He's in Waves. He's in a bunch of things. But he has a real soft, squishy face.
Okay.
And I thought he would be a good paternal maternal kind of figure. Who's your Cooper?
Cooper. I mean, he's like the comic relief. So I was thinking like, okay, a Kevin Hart type, if he would ever agree to do a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, well, you get to cast it. Do what you want to do.
Who did you have for Cooper?
I went with Henry Rollins. I think it was because I did Clifton Collins and then Henry Rollins came into my mind. Okay, who's your Stark?
Okay, so Stark, I recently saw the underwater movie with Kay Stu, and now I just kind of want to see her in more things. So I went younger, do a Kay Stu. I mean, she's like the sexy sci-fi officer, so.
I went with Tilda Swinton.
Oh, okay. So interesting. I thought about Tilda Swinton in this role, and I was like, that's too weird. But I love it. Okay. Good.
Okay, who's your Miller?
Miller is who did I have for Miller? Okay. Again, weird, but I would like to see just like an over dramatic version of Miller. So like maybe a Kenneth Branagh.
Nice. That's a good one. That is a good one.
I mean, after what was it? The recent like World War II movie that he did, I could see him being a more like staid, like I will lead you through this and then sacrifice myself.
I went with actually I kind of double cast it, but I'll go with Jodie Foster.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Not for someone like Weir? I could see her going, yeah, okay.
It sets against my Weir properly, I think.
Okay, do you want to do your Weir first then?
Yeah, my Weir is Octavia Spencer.
Ooh, that is good.
Like a Ma Weir.
Oh, that'd be really good.
So then Jodie Foster could play against that kind of goofy.
Yeah,
She doesn't have to be as, this is weird to say, but as warm as Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah, no.
She could be colder.
Some warmth. That would be a lot more terrifying. That movie would be a lot more scary. Event Horizon would be very, very scary. Who's my Weir? I'm blanking on my Weir right now. It was someone who could play. I can't remember now. I should have written it down.
Was it Javier Bardem? Because he was my other one.
No, it was who plays Loki in the new?
Oh, Tom Hiddleston?
Yeah, it was Hiddleston. That's who it was. I wanted to see him go kind of like, ugh.
Yeah, he could totally do that. Okay.
He's not hard on the eyes. So when he does the whole like naked, carved into runes thing, wouldn't hate it, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Where you're going in your movie, you need to be able to see. Okay, well, thank you so much for chatting about Event Horizon. But before we wrap up, were you aware that Proust had a younger sister named Becky?
No. I did. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
And Becky developed a 5-question questionnaire to determine whether or not you love movies. That's also true.
Okay.
Do you care to take it?
Yeah, I think I gotta take Becky Proust's sister's film quiz.
So what was your first R-rated movie?
My first R-rated movie was this monster movie called The Relic.
Oh yeah, is that with Mira Sorvino or not? I'm thinking of something else.
I don't think she's in it, or I'm not sure. I'm not great with actor names, as we've discovered. I'm good with like unpacking the themes of a movie and relating it to art history, but when it comes to actor names, I'm kind of like, yeah, it was like, I definitely saw that when I was like 7 or 8, so probably too young. And it was one of those ones that like stuck with me because I had horror movies about a like bio gory monster that ate the hypothalamus out of every human, and scary.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you, by the way, audience. I was thinking of Mimic, which the way I go about words is weird, but Mimic Relic, there we are. Okay, what movie would you be compelled to buy, even though you might have a copy, who knows? But you see it at Picker's Paradise for $2 and you gotta have it.
Yes, so Disney's 1940 Fantasia. I love that movie. I could watch that every day until I die and be so satisfied and never get bored. It's like this whimsical, like imaginarium of animation and early illustration methods. And it's got, Stokowski doing all these like major movements of classical music, and Mickey Mouse shows up every now and then, but it's not like overly, I don't know, it's not overly branded. It's nice.
No, like Mickey's real minimal in it, which is good because I don't like that Mickey very much.
I know. Also, they have a whole like evolution sequence, which I feel like Disney wouldn't do now. I don't know.
Yeah, and maybe it got, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it's been politicized for for a long time. But yeah, I think that, well, generally Disney doesn't try to educate you.
Right.
Like they moved away from that. We're going to give you facts.
Right.
And that happens in the 1960s, I think.
Yeah.
Is when that stops, and they just realize it's not worth parental like parents upbraiding you
like
about
backlash.
What are you trying to teach my kids, you know?
The conservative backlash. And yet
or the liberal one, just like,
yeah.
Don't tell my kid facts.
Right.
Don't do that.
And this is like, here are the best like classical pieces that you should listen to. Here's how dinosaurs died. Here are a bunch of Greek myths that you need to learn about. I love it. It's great.
Nice. In the bathroom at work, there is a Fantasia poster. I don't know why, but if you're using the toilet, you're just looking at Mickey and cursor, and then so weird.
That's so
There's
funny.
no other art in like but there's that Mickey poster. Okay, what is your? Oh wait, no, I skipped forward. What is the best movie to watch on a second date?
Best movie? Okay, so like we could go for the like fun action, again, space movie, A Fifth Element. Amazing. Got some laughs, got some action, got some opera. So good. Great costume, practical effects, set design, all of that. Or you could go for something a little bit more like, I don't know, weird and cautionary with It Follows, but kind of like a spook, but also like use protection.
right. It's a PSA.
The PSA one.
Did I tell you when I saw It Follows? Did I tell you this experience?
I don't know.
So I was trying to like, I wanted to watch it so badly, and it was like 10:20. It was like 10:20 at night on a Monday. I really want to see this. There's no way it's around South Bend at this point. And I just like Googled it, and it was starting at 10:25 on a Monday night, which is perfect.
Yeah.
So, because that's like the amount of time I get there, and the previews would be over and whatnot. I show up because it's Monday at like 10:20 with a movie that has zero footprint in South Bend, and I am the only person in the movie theater. It was that's a tricky one, especially when it's scenes of being scared in a movie theater.
Yeah.
What I like to do when I am the only person in the theater, I like to lay down. So I laid down, and during it, the person who was cleaning came in and scared me like half to death. So I screamed at them, and they got it worse, all the same. So I think that would be
You
a very
definitely
good
did not
second.
tell me that story. That's great.
It was a funny night. Okay, what is your favorite toppings on a pizza?
Anchovies.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. What is your favorite pizza? Or sorry, what is your favorite movie to watch while eating an anchovy pizza on the couch?
Mm. So something like, again, good practical effects, something like Willow, or like Willow and anchovy sound great. It's like weird, but like kind of tasteful.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Yeah, I like that.
Willow and anchovies.
Last question. You are 10 years old. From the future, you receive a screener. What film most blows your mind?
I mean, I don't think I'd understand it fully as a 10-year-old, but like some of Ari Aster's stuff, like if I saw Hereditary when I was 10 or Midsummer when I was 10, I'd be like, what? Um, yeah, I think a nice Hereditary would be, it would
And
scare
it would be your age group. Like,
Yes.
you could potentially identify with the sister and then be like, whoa, I'm not supposed to die.
Don't put your head out the window.
Got less than one. 1 second, let me do the calculations.
Oh yeah.
Hey, it turns out you love movies.
You got me.
Gotcha. And we loved having you here on Zoom Back Camera. Thank you so much, Sarah, for talking to us about Event Horizon. Have a good weekend, everybody, and we hope to see you back next week for the last week of classes and the last week of version 1.0 of Zoom Back Camera. Have a good one, everybody.